Welcome to the Queer Love Podcast, the silly and serious shenanigans of two queer relationship coaches. I am your host, Elizabeth Cunningham.
And I'm your host, Lee Greeps.
On this podcast, we talk about how to live your best queer life with fulfilling, healthy relationships and anything else that makes your little queer heart happy. Because living your life outside of the heteronormative scripts is totally possible for you.
Each episode, we explore all things queer love from our professional perspective as relationship coaches, our own personal experiences, and as partners.
If you love our show, follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter at Queer Love Relationships. You can also check out our website, www.queerloverelationships.com.
Thanks for following us and enjoy this episode.
Welcome to the Queer Love Podcast.
Woo, woo,
And
It's gonna be so productive.
it's gonna be so great. so great. So today we have our friend Chamonix.
Hello. Oh my God. When we hang out, we just laugh. So this is how it's gonna go.
This is how it's gonna go today. It's gonna be great. Chamonix, tell the amazing people who you are.
Only using animal sounds.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, I'm so many things. Today, Holly will appear in the world as I am an artist, and I'm also a coach and a healer and a yoga teacher and a writer, and I travel. And these days I'm in the mood to make animal sounds. And yeah, I have a lot of different parts inside of me, a lot of different personalities. Yeah.
I love it. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today is internal family systems. Because
IFS.
IFS.
The ifs.
What ifs?
What ifs? Well, today we're going to talk about said ifs.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm an IFS nerd.
Yeah. IFS nerd, IFS coach.
Yep. IFS practitioner. Yeah, so I use IFS in my own world internally. I see IFS therapists. I have an IFS coach. I offer IFS coaching to other people. I make lots of different types of art, and I use IFS in the making of those types of art. And then any conversation I have will be influenced through the lens of IFS. Basically.
That is true. That's accurate.
Yeah. Swimming in the soup.
Yeah. I'm into it.
We are too. It's one of the reasons we love talking to you.
I'm very curious how you guys use IFS, or I mean, it's just kind of how humans work, and it's just a way to talk about it. So, do you talk about it explicitly with people?
Sometimes I talk about IFS specifically with people, but mostly, especially, I'm familiar with internal family systems, but I'm not trained in it. And so I usually just use the words like parts or part of you, or and especially like on the podcast and stuff, I'll say like, oh, a part of you or parts of you or something like that. And like in coaching, I coach with people's parts, but it's not specifically IFS, because, and you and I have talked about this, but like, one of the modalities that I was trained in, definitely goes into parts work, but it's not like specifically the modality of like internal family systems. Yeah. So definitely do like parts work. And I love doing parts work for myself. And I love doing parts work with people that I work with, because it is really, really helpful. Yeah.
It's effective.
Very effective.
That's why I'm so nerdy about it, because it's been like the most effective tool I have found that works with me.
Yeah.
And then when I'm working with other people, I'm like, oh, this is all helpful. But if we just did some IFS, we'd solve your problems.
Yeah.
Brings out magic potion.
You just drink this.
Oh my gosh.
I feel like we should define internal family system.
Yeah.
What is
You go
internal
for it.
family
What is
system?
it?
What? You are trained in it, madam.
Well, I like to give you the spotlight, and then I can be like, that's wrong. No, I'm kidding. Okay,
No, yeah.
so internal family systems.
Pop quiz.
How
on
should
your
I define it
education.
today? I get to talk about it all the time, so I'm always describing it and tweaking it. And today I feel like describing it by, breaking it down. So internally, inside of us, in your inner world, there's a family, and that family functions in a system that's either functional or dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
And it has very similar patterns and behaviors, if not exactly the same as the family that's external, like the family that you live in with your parents and your siblings and your cousins and all this. And so, and then your family is also part of a system, a bigger system in the community.
Mm-hmm.
So there's systems inside of systems inside of systems. And at every layer, the way that these different parts of the systems relate to each other, it functions with patterns. Mm-hmm. So most of us will be familiar with just an external family system. Mm-hmm. Like however you behaved as a child, influenced by your parents. If someone's upset, you know how someone else is going to react. Mm-hmm. If there's a fight, you usually all play it out the same way. Mm-hmm. Someone's always going to get hurt the same way. They have the same sensitivity. It's very predictable. And for something like that to change, somebody in the system has to change. Mm-hmm. And then it's the same on the inside. So we're made up of, in IFS, there's an assumption that our human body, our human mind is not just one thing. It's actually made up of multiple parts. Mm-hmm. And each of those parts are a different part of your internal family. So if one of those parts get hurt or mad or whatever, the other parts are going to react. And they all start to have a pattern and a predictable way of how they act. Mm-hmm. And if you want to change that, and like, let's say the way they're acting is making your life really shitty and uncomfortable and difficult, and you're like, all the time, inside my head, there's always a fight. I'm always in conflict. I feel stuck. I feel unhappy. It's just an unhappy family. And it's just a family that's fighting. And so you can go in and help one of them, and then help two of them understand each other, and then help them all come together and sit in a circle. And then as they all heal, eventually you get to the point where you have a happy, functional internal family. And you can build the family that you've always dreamed of having inside. So if you're like, man, I've always just wished that there's this little part inside of me who wished that her dad was always there and present and giving attention, then you go in and that little part of you gets to experience that, because you're going to give that energy to them. And so the parts all start to get their needs met internally by you, and you is we call it the self. Mm-hmm. And this is where IFS is a really beautiful complement. Not a compliment, it's just it crosses over from therapy into the world of spirituality, which is different than other types of therapy, which might just be analyzing the mind. Mm-hmm. This is where we start to identify that in all of humans, in all of us, there's like a core, like a light inside of us that's like a divine, God-like Buddha nature. Mm-hmm. We call it self, and that's the energy that we go to meet these different parts and lead them with. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these parts have no idea that there are other parts, and they don't have any idea that there is this like God energy inside of us. So you have to slowly introduce yourself and like rebuild the whole family. It's stranger like danger. Yeah, like when you start doing IFS, you go inside and you'll find a part and you'll start talking to it, and it's like, who are you? I don't trust you. Just like if some stranger walked in your house, your kids aren't just going to obey them. Mm-hmm. And so you have to build slowly relationships and build trust until that happy family happens, because all these different parts start to trust the self is actually there to lead and protect and bring them together. Mm-hmm. And when they get to that place, it's really playful. The house is full of laughter and joy and freedom and like creative projects and like dream life on the inside. Mm-hmm. And then that spreads to your outer world too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's how I would have defined it too. I was just checking that, that you're understanding.
Didn't want to outshine our guests.
I know, right?
Know?
Like, come on. Oh my God. Just wanted to make sure everyone knew that.
It's important.
It's important.
I completely agree.
Well, like my thought too, because I guess what is the distinction that you make for people? Because it's like, people either hear of like IFS or like parts work, or they think of like inner child like work. Like, what's the distinction there?
Yeah, inner child is this idea that you have an inner child and there's just this one child inside of you that you need to go find and connect with and be there for. And IFS is presenting the idea that we have many parts. So it's many inner children and so many parts that some of them are children of all different ages. Some of them are grown-up adults. You might even have parts that are older than your actual physical age. So it's the fact that it's multiple.
Yeah.
And that inner child work, often people kind of go in like it's like this one and done job. Like, oh, I connected with my inner child, she's cool.
Yeah.
Versus like, okay, imagine you actually adopted a child.
Yeah.
Every day you got to take care of the child.
Yeah.
Like that child is now in your life forever, every day, feed it, spend all day with it. You're not just like, I adopted a child, she's downstairs.
Yeah. It's cool. We connected one day and I was sick.
And I do like inner child work every few months. I go like take her out. You're just like, okay. So that's a distinction with IFS, and especially for effective IFS. So like where I see it most powerful in my life, or with it when I'm working with someone, I'm like trying to drill it in. Like, now that you've met this part of you, if you want this to work, you need to talk to this part. They are now a part of your family. Like, so that idea of a happy family, in your happy family, do your parents talk to you every day? Or did you get abandoned?
Yes.
Because that's what you're doing inside. So I've had a few clients who will be like, oh, I've done inner child work before and I don't know if it's going to work. It didn't work. And I'm like, well, that's because you found a child and abandoned it.
When was the last time you talked to that child?
Yeah. And so I'm like, establish the connection and take on the role of parenting. And if you have a problem parenting, like, I don't want kids, that's a part of you that doesn't want kids.
Dude. Heartception, man.
Called out.
Oh my God.
Called out.
Yeah, that's what happened to me in my very first session.
Dude, solid start. Yeah. You just like you walked out of there and you're like, well, I feel like this could be helpful.
My very first IFS session was me going to the therapist to be like, I have some jealousy issues and pain around polyamory. Help me fix this. And so she's like, okay, like, where do you feel that? And I was like, this ripping death feeling in my chest.
Again, strong start.
Yeah. And then she's like, okay, well, let's focus on that. And we did the inner journey. And I was like, okay, I think she's like 12 years old. She feels left out at school. It's like a little girl that feels left out. And when my partner is with someone else, I'm outside. I feel left out. I feel unwanted. And my therapist was like, okay, well, like, can you be there for that little girl and like start to be like a caretaker for her? And then I was like, I don't want kids. Like, I don't want to check in on this child every day. I've got other things to do. And then we were like, okay, well, who's that part? Like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to be in my convertible, wearing sexy black leather, driving at high speeds into the mountains to make music at the gorge. And I'm not taking care of children. And then my therapist was like, okay, so that's a part of you that highly values like speed and rebellion and
like
adventure, independence,
freedom.
Yeah. So tell that part she does not have to take care of the kid.
Oh my God.
And then my therapist said, is there any part of you that would be interested in spending time with this child? And I was like searching inside. And then I was like, okay, there is this like part of me that really loves nature. She's kind of like a medicine woman from the forest, like I like to go to the forest. I mean, I wouldn't mind if like a kid sat next to me in the woods, you know, I'd just be like, look at this nice river.
Yeah.
Here's a leaf. Yeah, it's nice. Like I'm not like this super maternal part, but like at peace. You know?
Right.
Like,
Yeah. I mean, that answers the question. Is there any part of you?
Yeah, exactly. And then so we identified that, and then my therapist also said, this is when she introduced the idea of self. She was like, no part of you is responsible for this child. You're going to learn how to be in self, which is just this like God-like unconditional love kind of energy where you can be there for a child. It's every person has that inside of them. And so you're going to have to learn how to tap into that, because the other parts will get tired if they have to take care of a child. Even parts that are maternal will get tired.
Yeah, like mothers.
Like mothers.
Exactly.
Exactly. But self is unlimited resource of love. So if you can just tap into that a little bit to connect with the child, and then you found a part, for me, it was this part that loved the nature. That part could be kind of like a big sister or a mentor. So after that first session, I went to Golden Gardens and I sat, which is a beach. I sat,
for those of you who don't know what Golden Gardens is.
Yep. I sat on the beach with my husband on a log, and I was like, okay, babe, I just started therapy. And we're going to sit together, and just over there on that log in the distance, I have two of my parts, which are imaginary there. And I had the big sister, little sister sitting on a log, and I gave them this, like, you guys just talk. Like, I don't even know what they're going to talk about. I just know that they're going to sit there. And it's because the little girl and all them didn't really want to talk to me. I didn't want to take care of them. And so I practiced letting them exist and letting them exist together. And this is all like subconscious work. So I was like, I'm trusting that there's a part of my subconscious that can mentor the part that's that's the child. And then I just felt a sense of completion after a little while. And I was like, okay, I think we can leave the beach. And that was the beginning of my IFS journey. And then over time, just as if you were befriending a real child or befriending an animal, it starts to realize that you keep checking in on it, and it starts to gradually open up. And then I started to tap into self and realize, like, oh, I can actually sit with this kid. It's not threatening me. But I was also simultaneously working with the rebellious part, who'd be like, we're taking too long with this child. And I'm just like, okay, well, we'll go on a wild adventure later today if you just let me sit with her for like 5 minutes. So you start working with everybody inside.
Dude, what a party.
Yeah, parts party. And also party. Party. It's a whole room full of parts.
Parts party.
Parts party.
Man.
Yeah. And now get this, just fast forward 4 years. I have found a part of me that is a newborn, like an infant. And all different ages. So if you think about it also as like, these are just kind of imprints of our life. So when I was an infant, something happened to me that kind of froze a part of me in time, like traumatically. And I was then being affected by it. So it was this feeling of I can't remember the whole story right now off the top of my head, but when I was a child, the first time I ever left my mom, or my mom left me, I didn't leave her ever.
I was in like a little baby, like, bye. He crawls over.
Oh my God. So I've been attached to my mom for like 9 months, 10 months, whatever. And then the first time she decides to go on a run, and she left me at home with my dad. And when she came back, I was totally wet and cold and shivering. And my dad was like, make her stop crying. And I'd heard that story a bunch. And then it was in the therapy deep dive where I realized that part of me was still just like, I'm cold and I'm alone. And that's the same story that came up as an adult. Like whenever I would be, well, just all throughout my life, I've had these moments where I'm like, I'm so cold and I'm crying, and it's not even cold outside, but I just feel cold. So it was like imprinted in the body. And I would,
so fast.
Right.
Well, that's how I'm like, I was telling you, Elizabeth, like on a podcast like a couple weeks ago, and she wasn't talking about parts work like specifically, but she brought it into the conversation as a therapist. But she was just saying like how like each part has like, in terms of like that you know, when like trauma is happening, it's gonna have its own like frequency and like vibration. So it's like that part has that, and then there's like another part. So it's like the nervous system like reset work that you have to do. For each part is different. So it's not like, oh, let me tend to my nervous system as a whole. It's like, what part is present? What's going on with that part? What's the frequency of that, and everything? And I'm like, dude, that is.
That's
I just
wild.
like see like it's like those like drawings that are like so trippy that when you just like
They
keep,
change.
like just keep going and going,
Yeah.
you're like, what is happening, right?
Yeah, it
Like-
makes me think of a fractal.
Yeah, there we
Yeah.
go.
IFS parts work is fractal.
Mm-hmm.
So our parts have parts.
Yeah.
What?
And those parts have parts.
What?
See, that's what I'm
That
saying.
is wild.
Because they are people. So
Yeah.
it's that infant was me, and she had all of her parts, and then she's a part of me that I can tap into, and so I went into my inner world and I found the little infant, and I was like, oh, that's why I've been so cold and alone, because she remembered that. And then you do a redo to reprogram.
Yeah.
And so I went in and I scooped her out of my father's arms and was like, now I'm taking care of you.
Yeah.
And then I've done so much work with the rebellious wild adventure part that she will babysit the child now.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's like the cool aunt, you know?
Yeah. Exactly. She's not like super maternal, but she's like, yeah, sure, I'll hold the baby. It's fine. Because now she realizes there's trust that I'm not going to, she doesn't have to do it. She's just holding it for a second.
Right, like she's not gonna be like left with this child kind of thing.
And to your point, so learning IFS is really just learning to be a parent. So reading a lot of parenting books while you're studying IFS.
Oh,
that makes sense.
Yeah. So I've actually learned how to be a mom through this in a way that like I never wanted kids. I never thought I would like them. And by going through this process, I now take care of a bunch of children all the time. So I actually have stepped into maternal energy.
Plot twist.
Yeah. Total plot twist. I really get it. And then different parts of you at different ages, it's like being a parent. You have to learn the developmental stages of different children. So I had one client who we had this one part of her who would not talk to us. And then we found out that, well, she would talk to us, but she'd always say no. And then I was like, how old is she? She's 3. And you're like, oh, she's a toddler. What happens at 3? And they're like, no. And so then we started treating her the way you would treat a toddler, and you start getting responses.
Yeah.
So you treat the parts as people at whatever age they show up. So like the infant I found, I don't throw her all around. Like we hold her.
Right.
Like
and you don't talk to her like an adult.
Exactly. We're all and then developmental stages of humans, you can treat your parts inappropriate.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, like the thing for me, because I've done some parts work, right? Like, but not like in depth or anything. But like the thing that's challenging for me, and even like just hearing you say all of this, I'm like, dude, how am I supposed to take care of all these children?
This is a part of you. I'm really overwhelmed.
Dude, that's because I was I had a what was it? It was like a couple weeks ago, like one of my therapies, like I do like EMDR, right? And so it's like you end up going to a part where you're like, okay, right? And so then you come to that part, and then I'm like, what do I do with this child? Like, and then because it's that it is totally like the overwhelmed, or like it's like the part of me that feels like I can't do this.
Yeah.
Like it's like I have been left with this child. Like, what am I supposed to do? You know, because I'm like, I don't.
And that's where they leave you.
Yeah, like, and it's like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, you know, and because I have not read parenting books or anything of that nature.
You're just looking at it.
Like, I'm like, okay, I can do, like, you know, but I've been working with like that part specifically is like a 3-year-old.
Is it acting like a 3-year-old?
Yeah, like a scared, like scared 3-year-old, who's like kind of like the situation is like I'm voiceless, so it's like I'm not even I'm not saying no, like, right. And so it's like so like the first experience was like very like that part was very kind of like trepidatious.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like I have like been like tapping into like, you know, visiting this part of me and stuff. And it's like to the point where now it's like, oh, that's like come over to me and like I can hold them. And like it's just like I'm just it's just like I'm just holding. We're not even I'm like, oh, and like I like the other day I was like doing like a little practice and I was like, it was like raining, but it was like gentle rain, and it was like just like falling asleep, like in my arms, you know. And it's like, oh yeah, that was very different from like however many weeks ago it was, where it was like, who left me with this child?
Yeah,
you know. But that's why I'm like, man, that you know, there is that part of me though. It's like, oh my god, all these parts. What do I do with all these parts? Like,
yeah, part of you feels overwhelmed. And the cool thing about all these parts is that they don't need as much attention as physical children. So if you had a room full of 10 physical children,
right?
It's like
Obviously
kindergarten,
that's different.
right?
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Parts can be very quickly, easily satisfied. So you just ask them or find information from them.
Yeah.
What do you actually need? And a lot of them are like, I just want you to say hi to me in the morning. And then you can literally go and be like, hey guys. And they're like, hey. And then you're like, okay, cool. Anybody need anything? And then one of them might be like, I need a hug. And they're like, all right.
Yeah.
They're so easy to please.
Yeah.
Especially as they heal.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like for me, when I found that newborn baby part, it needed to be held constantly. Like an infant needed to always be held.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was like, I can't constantly be doing this because I can't just sit here and hold an imaginary baby. I have to do things. And that's where I asked my parts, are any of you available or willing to hold the baby when I'm not actively meditating and holding the baby?
Yeah.
And I had 2 of my adult parts volunteer and said they would do that. So then if I'm holding the baby in a meditation, when I'm done, I'll like hand it to my part, and then subconsciously they're just together until I come check on it again.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's simpler.
Yeah. And you can communicate with your parts. You can tell them like, there's a lot of you each get to have one request, or we need to come up with one way that we do a group activity together, because I can't spend time with all of you right now, or just like the way you would handle a big group of people that doesn't burn you out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, because I'm like, that's definitely like the part of me. It's like, I want to spend one time with all of you.
Yeah. And like, oh, you can have so much fun with it. Like, I do a lot of inner circles, like I like women's circles. And so most of my parts are female, so I just call them women's circles inside my head. And sometimes it's too much to have them all talk, but they like to connect energetically with your parts. Just like visualize them all, hold hands, and then just tell them we're just gonna be together for like 5 minutes. We're just gonna sit. You guys can sit with me while I meditate.
Yeah.
You can include them in any activities. Like, I'm gonna cook dinner. You can sit on the counter and watch me cook. And then the part feels present, but you can get on with whatever else you
do. Like you're not, you're like, hang out with me or whatever, or like sitting here like reading a book and just being like, hey, sit next to me and whatever.
And when little parts feel really upset and they want to hang out with you all day, like, no, mommy, don't leave. Then I'll give them like, you can be on my back, piggyback ride all day. And I've gone to like photo shoots where I'm like interacting with adults in the real world, and I'm like, you don't know, I've got an imaginary child on my back. She's back there because we had problems this morning.
I love that. Oh my god, what are you thinking about over there? I was like, tap in.
No, well, I'm thinking about, some of like the IFS work, that we've done. And I'm also like, there's a part of me that feels really worried, like I'm going to like neglect these parts or like do something wrong. Right,
like re-traumatize the parts,
right? Exactly. Like I'm the part of me that always thinks I'm gonna ruin everything. That part of me, Lee is very familiar with that part.
Like, that
one, the one that's always like, well, I'm gonna do everything wrong and ruin everything. So, so I'm like, so when you said the thing about like, oh, that's a part of you, like the part of you that's like, oh, I don't want to take care of kids or whatever, right? I'm like, oh, like that kind of triggered for me, like, oh, that's a part of me. There's a part of me that's like, I'm gonna do everything wrong. I'm gonna ruin everything. Like I need to worry about this because I'm gonna fuck it up. So I should probably figure that out, but I'm probably not gonna figure it out. I'm probably just gonna fuck it up. But I need to worry about it because I need to do something about it because I care. But like I'm gonna ruin it, so I don't know. Like,
and that's when you just go. So, what are you afraid would happen if you fucked it up?
Mm.
Am I gonna answer that right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Microphone.
Like I'm gonna be alone.
Mm-hmm. What happens if you're alone?
Like then I'm sad.
Mm-hmm. Now we could go into a deep meditation session right now, and we could go deeper into when you think about being sad. What memories do you have? When was the last time you felt like that? And then we start to find Elizabeth's going to be like, oh, I remember this time in my childhood where that feeling was present.
Mm-hmm.
And then we flesh out and realize there's a whole part there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start taking care of that part.
Yeah.
But it's just usually catching yourself thinking, like, and then pulling the thoughts away and realizing that's a person talking at you.
Mm-hmm.
And just being like, why are you talking to me constantly about worrying you're going to fuck it up?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right.
Like, what is that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then once it gives you an answer, it's really great to just be like, and what are you afraid would happen if that did? And what are you afraid would happen if that happened?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm afraid I'm going to fuck it up. And if I fuck it up, I'm afraid I'll be alone. And if I'm alone, I'm afraid I'll be sad. And you can just ask, what are you afraid of? 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 And it usually boils down to, I'm going to be alone
Mm-hmm.
and just die. Die, like the existential loneliness of being alone.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when you're like, and you'll never be alone because I'm here.
Right.
Problem solved. But that's you're showing these parts of you that you're the one, that self energy is the one that's going to be there for them. And until they meet self, they're still looking out and being like, maybe daddy will be there for me. Maybe that boyfriend will be there. Maybe work will be there. What was yours? You don't want to fuck things up. I can't fuck these things up because I need to somehow keep things around me so I'm not alone. And you're showing your part. You can fuck up everything.
Yeah. Like
and I'm still going to be here with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's really powerful. I also just had the thought of like, maybe that's why I have a hard time of like letting things, like physical things. Like I have a hard time like letting physical things go. Yeah. Not like obviously like we're in my house right now, so it's not like I'm like a hoarder or anything like that. But there is like a part of me that like has a really hard time like letting physical things go because I'm just like, oh, I'm going to need this at some point, and like, oh, that'll be on like surface level, it's like, oh, that would be annoying if I didn't have that thing. And then like kind of, but like next level is like, oh, I would be that would be disappointing. And then like next level is like, oh, I would be like, I'm wasteful. I'm like hurting the environment. I'm actively doing something as like a bad person. You know, like bad people do things to hurt the environment, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah.
Yeah.
The holding on to things is interesting because it's always parts that are holding on to stuff. So like if you're a hoarder, then like you could be hoarding because there's memories attached to your items, and this part of you is protecting your memories. It's often you'll find hoarding with generational trauma, so the whole family will hoard because they went through a depression. So it's literally like, we can't let go of anything because we need to survive, and we might not have money to get this, and if we let this go, then we're never going to get it again, and it boils down to survival.
Dude, that was like my grandpa, who was like survived like World War II, like in Germany, like oh my god, the stuff that he would like, and it was very much like, no, we need to hold that, like we need, and they were always well off, and like where it was like, you don't have to worry about that, right? You know, but And it's like, and I see that like, and then in my dad, like, and it's like, I'll feel that in myself where I'm like, I'll like be like, well, but, and then.
So you're feeling it inherited.
Yeah, like, and that's where like I can see, and I'm like, because like when I feel it, I'm like, this is not mine. Like, I'm totally, and like my instant thought is like, I think of like my family line in Germany, right? Like, it's like, I'm like, oh no, this, and it feels like I will get like glimpses of like war things, right? And I'm like, no, that's why I'm feeling the need to, because it's like they didn't have anything, right? Like they had to like go fight and get things and all that. So it's like, yeah, why would I let that go? Like, then I'm gonna have to go fight and get something, right?
We call it what you're experiencing is a legacy burden. That's the word in IFS. So legacy as in it's been handed down.
Yeah.
And it's a burden because it's obviously a fucking burden.
Yeah, right. It doesn't feel light,
right? And so there's a part of you that's carrying a burden, and that burden is a pain and a belief that has been passed down.
Yeah.
But it doesn't belong to you. And so the way we heal that is finding that part of you, explaining to that part, well, actually really just letting it first tell us everything it needs. So that we're like looking at what the issue is.
Yeah.
And then you're like, by the way, this probably isn't yours.
Yeah.
And that part's like, yeah, no, I know. And this is the craziest thing. You can ask the part how much of this is yours. And it will tell you probably an exact number, percentage wise.
Yeah.
And then whatever percentage belongs to you because of something that's happened in your life,
right?
We can heal that with you. And then whatever is not yours, we energetically pass it back through the ancestral line as far back as it needs to go until you find a healthy ancestor that did not have this. And then that healthy ancestor releases it on behalf of the family.
That's wild.
Yeah, and dude, this is where it gets spiritual.
No, I'm like, that's like, I'm like, oh no,
I know. So we have legacy burdens are these painful things that were passed down, and we also have legacy heirlooms. That's the good shit that got passed down.
Oh, okay, well,
yeah. So we welcome it all, and then if it's not ours, we pass it back. And then this is what I really like. Is that everyone before you will not be able to release it until you release it because you're holding it.
Yeah.
So they don't have it anymore.
Yeah. And you literally have to be like, take it back. And that's where people resist it. They're like, I don't want to give this back to them.
It's like, it's theirs.
It's theirs. And then you hand it back to your mom or your dad. And then now it's in a spiritual realm.
Yeah.
That's up to you. You can call in your ancestors and your spirit guides and all that to help you. And then now it's in their hands, so now they can heal it.
Yeah.
And you will feel liberated.
Dude,
you do it on behalf of your family because then the spirits behind can finally let go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Legacy burden.
Dude, legacy burden.
And a lot of legacy burdens are coming out of people at the moment.
Yeah.
So IFS therapists, me, my mentor, we're all kind of like seeing it pop up a lot right now. So
I was like
generational
hearing
trauma.
that like the astrological sense like right now, like there's a lot of a lot of intergenerational where it's like having the recognition, like especially like in partnerships and things, it's like the person before, it's like you are not like it's like you're dealing with all the like intergenerational things that are present in this person. So like being able to see that like in relationships, right? Because it's like you're not seeing them, right? Because it's like they're carrying so much just as you are, and so like being able to help in that releasing process. Dude,
I know.
Dude, I'm
so for you with the hoarding in the family, the first thing is to just start witnessing. So like grab your journal and just start writing down everything that you can think of.
Yeah.
That's like, tell me about that. And you're like, well, my dad held on to this and that. And how do you feel about it? I didn't like it. And you just drain it, like empty it until you get to a place where if someone says, tell me more, you're like, there's nothing else. Like full, now we've seen it.
Okay.
And when you get to that, like I've seen it all. And then you can help your part be like, okay, you want to be done with that now? And then you move on.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And it can take a while. The legacy burdens take a while.
Yeah.
Like your own personal trauma, maybe we heal it quickly, weeks, days, whatever. Months. The legacy burdens can take years.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
yeah, like how far back is
Yeah.
it like actually?
Yeah. So like I've been doing IFS for just over 4 years now. And right now I'm getting into the meaty part of actually releasing legacy burdens that I've been working on just getting to.
Dang.
And for 4 years being like, I have this trauma. And then suddenly like last month, it's like, it's not mine. But I thought it was mine for 4 years.
Yeah.
Because you have to
really like dig at it.
Yeah, because it's something like, well, this happened to me, and this happened to me, and this happened to me. And eventually you're like, oh, all of that was just repeating the pattern that happened to my mother.
Yeah.
So you have to dig your own layer first.
That like, like I'm getting like the visual of like, it's like those like little scraps of like paper, you know, like over something that like you can't, but it's like your little things, but then you see like this like heavy bowling ball, and you're like, that's not mine though. Like it's like that's grandma's bowling ball or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And you're just like, oh, like I mean that's what it sounds like for you, like removing all those people. You're like, oh, that's actually not mine.
Exactly.
That's cool.
Exactly.
Wow. It's all spiritual. It's always spiritual.
Because everything is spirituality. Like the body is spiritual, the mind is spiritual, the tree is spiritual.
That's like yeah. Spiritual. I mean, yeah, because everyone has their own thing around what spirituality or spiritual is, right? Like everyone's like, oh, well, I don't want. I'm like, it's just part of a larger thing, right? Like a larger connection. No, like that's all it is.
Like it's like oneness energy.
Yeah.
Woo! Yeah. What else we want to talk about?
Yeah. Now that we've solved the world's problem. No, what I'm aware of in this conversation is how relational all of this is. You know, like how important that, and like you know, one of the things you said was like knowing about parenting, like knowing about that like type of relationship, right? So yeah, that's way better. So what I was thinking about was how all of this is so relational, and how like it's so important to, and that's kind of like what I've been. Okay, there's like 3 thoughts that are like right there on top of one another. So one is that this is all relational.
Yes.
Thought 2 is that that's why it's so important to learn about healthy relationships, like for your inner world and for your outer world, just like every single thing that we touch is relational. And then the third thought was actually something that you said to me like a couple of years ago, and that's just like always like really stuck with me.
She's like,
I said something important. Tell me of my genius.
We say so many great things to each other. But what you said was, you know, everyone has their thing that's going to, and everything leads you to God. And I want for the people who are listening who might not resonate with the word God, you know, it's more like God, like the oneness, you know, or like unconditional love, or like that higher energy, or like, you know, that field, or like if you're a Star Wars fan, the Force. But like everything leads you back to that. Like if you're a painter, if you're a musician, if you are a healer, if you are whatever your thing is, like if you have that kind of like devotional relationship to it, it's all going to lead back to that. All of it, no matter what. And I'm like, that is so true. And like one of those things for me is like relational work, obviously, which is like one of the reasons why I love this work, you know, so much, is that it's like having that like devotional relationship to relational work is really about like the spirituality of it, and like the oneness of it, and like how we are all so connected. And that in learning to relate to one another in like a healthy way, that it's just that everything could be solved in learning how to relate to one another, including ourselves, which is what I'm hearing with like the IFS work. It's like learning how to relate to yourself and all of the parts of yourself and learning how to navigate those relationships and like in this completely new way. Mm-hmm. Right? Like what a beautiful way to learn how to relate to all the parts of you. Yeah.
I love that. I'm glad you remembered that. I'll add to it now. So who you truly are is God. And everything that you do will lead you back to who you truly are. Mm-hmm. Because everything that happens in your life and on your path is the path, the journey you have to go on to get to being who you truly are. So even if you take some wild tangent, crazy mm-hmm. shit, that's the path you needed to take mm-hmm. to get to your destination of getting back to who you truly are, which is God.
Set of hands.
Yeah.
Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. I've really been resonating with the message of Jesus lately and the I am God and I am human. Mm. And with IFS saying the same message of self energy is the God energy. Mm-hmm. The parts are what make you human. Mm-hmm. So within you, you are God and human. Mm-hmm. And when they are functioning together actually as one beautiful being, mm-hmm. it's the relationship between God and human, or in self and part. And I'm aware of that. So I'm super comfortable with the word God. Just throw that out there. I didn't I'll throw it around. Been on a journey with it. Yeah. And what were you saying about? Oh, it made me think of music and harmony. And so with the system of parts, if they are all playing together, like different musical notes all playing together, mm-hmm. it just makes music and it's beautiful. But if one of them is out of tune, there's a dissonance and it's like and so it's the same if every part of you is getting along smoothly in harmony, is beautiful music. Mm. And then one part of you isn't, it's hurt or it's upset, and then you can feel it and it stands out. Mm-hmm. So the more we bring our parts together into a healthy relationship, the smoother and sweeter the music is. Yeah. And it's this also relating it to the human body. So if every piece of your body, if every part of your body is healthy, you don't notice any one part. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you just move through your day doing whatever you want. But the minute your knee hurts, it's all you can think about.
Right.
And so it's the same with your mind and the parts. You don't notice any of them.
Right.
If you're noticing that you have a lot of parts, they're probably not in harmony with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like that dissonance.
Yeah. And then same with God and human. If you're like, I'm a human and God's over there, you're not actually, you're separated.
Yeah.
But when you bring it together and you're like, whoa, I am the universe. Now you're in harmony. Mm-hmm. And that's healing. And healing actually means to bring something that was separated back together.
Mm-hmm. That's also so in my training, we talk a lot about polarity, and we have a lot of, the world is full of polarities, and again, this could get deeply spiritual, but in the work that I do, we also use that in emotions, right? So the polarity of anger versus peace, for example, or sadness versus happiness, or whatever the polarity might be for you. And then in the process, the processes that I've been trained in are uniting those polarities. And you can say it in a lot of different ways. You could say uniting the polarities, coming into oneness. You could also just say eliminating charge, coming back to neutral. You could use it in more practical terms. But in these processes, what happens is that when you do come to this place of oneness, there is that sense of coming together, right? Like, even though you were working with sadness and happiness, you get to this place of, oh, I actually can't feel one without the other. I'm at this place of merging, I'm at this place of oneness. And it does feel like peace or equanimity, or even, some people do report, like, especially people who are either more religious or spiritual, or feel more comfortable with that aspect of themselves, like, might say, like, oh, I feel like God, or I feel like oneness with God, or like something like that. Like, so it kind of depends on like your history, background, and like, etc. But it is the same concept of like, everything is one, like the separation is an illusion, and like when we can recognize that the separation is an illusion, then that's when we are in harmony. Right? Yeah. So it's like, again, one of the reasons also why I really love this work is because all of these, again, it goes back to what you said of just like, no matter what you do, it always leads you back, right? No matter what modality you choose, no matter, it doesn't matter. Like, it always leads you back eventually. Right.
I mean, makes me think of the whole talk of ancestors. Like, no matter what you do in this life, you came from your ancestors.
Yeah.
You can't like get away from it. You're just like, and she's still my mother.
Yeah.
You could kill her. She's still your mom.
We are not advocating
No,
for murder on this
it's just
podcast.
like where you came from and is always where you came from. But you can go wherever you want.
Yeah. Which, I mean,
and then that's this idea of like going back to where we came from.
Yeah.
Is going back to like who you are, going back to your home. Or so I guess the end destination is the starting spot.
Again, Wizard of Oz, The Alchemist.
Yeah.
All of these different like examples of people writing about this exact concept. But you have to go on the journey to like find that.
I'm like, it's the same as like all the archetypes like in the Bible, right? Like, it's like people read it so like literally, right? It's just like, he walked on water, that's crazy, but like, or whatever it is, or he turned it into wine and all that, right? But it's like, it is like, you like understanding the meaning of like, where it's like, no, like, it's the like being human and God, right? Like, it's just the clear connection of like, no, this archetype of a person, right, of being like, this is how it is in harmony, right? And it's like, and like how that then you can relate to the world and like the magic of the world, because it's like, now you're just working with the universe and you're the universe, and see how that is all like, oh, that creates an easier path, doesn't it? Right.
I'm curious with how this is landing with people. I'm like, man, this is like the most spiritual podcast episode that we've ever.
I'm so about this. I'm like, let's do this more.
I have a memory of something you said to me a few years ago. I think you told me I was the furthest out there friend that you had.
Is that what I said?
Because I was like, I'm like kind of spiritual, and you're like, you're in terms of the spectrum,
you're
one of the further out there people.
You are, and I didn't say that.
I didn't take it badly.
Okay,
I was
good.
Like, yeah, I'm special.
No, I was like, first time she mentioned you to me, she's like, oh, you would love Shaw. Like, and I was like, oh yeah, when she was telling me, I was like, oh yeah, I would totally love Shaw. I'm like, heck yeah, man.
That's like my parts. Just, I don't think I have any parts that don't just love. Like, let's see how far out we can explore. Like, it's like a core value or an essence, or just like in my DNA, it's just like exploration. And then I actually see that in my lineage, as my parents are explorers in the physical world. And I grew up being like, I'm not going to be adventurous. I'm not adventurous like my parents, because they're very adventurous people. And then I realized that I have always been adventurous, but in my way is in the spiritual. And it's like they might be off like at the North Pole or wherever, but I'm like, what's in here?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, whoa, I'm gonna go really far. Like my parents travel the world, and then I'm like fascinated by the spiritual world, which is just this like, and the microcosm inside is the macrocosm, and like let's just get lost in infinity.
Yeah. But it's also, I mean,
normal,
like
it's real.
I know, because I'm like, and it's, you know, the thing too, like, you know, because obviously we talk about relationships on this podcast, like on a very like earth plane, right? Like, but it's also, I mean, because this is something that comes up. I mean, you see it in like clients too, like that maybe like start off, you know, their relational healing growth work journey, and it's like, you know, not spiritual vibe or anything, right? And then it's like the more work you go into, it doesn't matter the modality, because again, it's like, where's it going to lead you?
Right.
You know, and it's just the natural path of it to become spiritual, even if it's like that's not what you're thinking, like you're just like, but it's just more of like, oh yeah, there is more harmony, there is more resonance, there's connection, because it's, and then it's then seeing that translate to your external relationships too. Like obviously like you feel more like, you know, at peace in yourself, right? But it's like then you see it in your relationships, and you're like, wow. And then you're seeing like yourself in your partner, right? Or yourself in your boss who like annoys you. You're like, oh no, that is also me, right? And it's like in all of that, you're seeing the oneness. You're seeing like, I can see the God in you, like you can see the God in me, right? Or whatever term.
Right.
I like God, but
I like God. It gets to the point, and then you got baggage around it.
Yeah. Which I mean, like, and that's the thing too. It's like because it's like I can say like, you know, God, I can see like, you know, has a lot of baggage, especially in like the queer space, right? Like, you know, and so it's like I definitely had like some baggage around that just because of how it's been like weaponized. But then I'm like, I'm not gonna let some like mean person like take that experience away from me, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, no, like I am comfortable with that, right? You know, and so it's also just it's again just being like, well, what like I don't want that to be like a hurtful thing for me, right? You know, and it's like the same. It's even just look at the word queer, like it's like taking back that term, right? So it's like so that you can find peace in yourself, right? Or find empowerment in yourself, or whatever it is. It's like it's the same thing with spirituality, which I mean all of everything is spiritual because we are spiritual beings, you know.
And that's where I'm like, duh. But some people are like, I'm not really spiritual. I'm like,
but
how
like,
are you not?
But I see that like,
breathing.
I'm like the more growth work, like it is just like a natural component of it. Like it just comes up, and it's gonna, you know, manifest differently for people, right? But it's all of a sudden you're tapping into that different essence of yourself, of your experience, and then of your relationships, where you're just like, wow, like we are not this separateness, right? And it just creates so much more like love and respect and just like honoring of each other too, because you're like, oh my God, look at this person just like doing their best out here with all the shit we're doing, right? And it's like, and then like finding that in yourself too, right? And so it's like that's why I'm like every time like that comes up as like people are like, oh no, I don't want to do any of that, but I want my relationships to be really great. And I'm like, well, you're gonna be doing that then. Like it might not be in a very direct way, like it tends to be like one of those sneaky ways where they're like, oh my God, now all of a sudden I'm diving into like more of these spiritual components, or like, oh, I'm having more spiritual experiences, or what I imagine the spiritual experiences to be, right?
Interesting. So I swim very deep in spiritual every day. And then like hearing you talk about this, I noticed parts of me showing up as we're sitting here. I have a part that's like kind of like, what? Oh yeah, there are people that are like uncomfortable with spirituality.
Yeah.
Whoa, I forgot about those.
There are a lot of people who are uncomfortable with spirituality.
And I'm like waving flags like, everyone who likes spirituality, come hang out with me.
They're like the person on like the airwaves, like the lights.
And like, I mean, I've just been so immersed in the spiritual world, and like I have my degree in theology, and that's just my world. And yeah, so first I have a part that comes up that's like, oh my God, I forgot there are people that are uncomfortable about this. I have a part that feels self-conscious that's like, have I said the word God too many times? And I have another part that's like, no, I can say it as much as I want. And then that's their problem. And then I have another part that is so compassionate because I used to be going through a whole journey of not wanting to use that word or never wanting to be associated with Christianity or something. And it's like, oh, I don't want someone to stop listening because they heard a word. Like, oh, come on, don't lose the conversation. So all these parts come up as we're talking about it. And I also know that like I see a lot of people maybe turned off by spirituality because they're not meeting or they're not encountering people who are embodying it.
Right. Oh my God, it for her version right there.
So like I'm waving my spiritual flags, but where I like when I hang out in a super spiritual community, I usually feel the least spiritual.
Yeah.
Because I'm not, and I'm gonna like mock all my friends in Bali right now. I'm not like, oh, sister, it's so beautiful to see your aura today. And it's like, I hate that, right?
I'd be like, no, and I would walk away.
Right? So I think, but that's what people like associate.
Yeah,
right?
so people are like, oh, spiritual, like this floaty energy and stars and angels, and it's all up here. And this
people aren't connect. Like for me, it's like there's a lot of people in my life who like really don't connect with spirituality, or like that's what they would say. They would be like, I don't connect with spirituality. Spirituality is not for me. And the vibe is like, I don't connect with people who are not connected to reality.
Right.
Like, why would I want to be, why would I have conversations about all this floofy stuff and also have to talk to people who say shit like that?
Right? It's when you get into the physical body, that's where the spirituality is located. And that's what people, I think, smell. They're just like, this is not embodied. This is not grounded. Talking to you is all over here.
I'm like, there's no grounding to it. And that makes such a difference.
Well, it's like, well, and then you have people like teachers like, Thich Nhat Hanh, for example, who's like, I would consider someone who's like very embodied in spirituality, but I feel like he's an easier person to listen to and to learn from because he has that like groundedness and like reality of it. And it's also, so it's like easier to connect, right? It's like it's like the avatar, like the bridge between worlds. But the other thing that I was gonna say before we go back, before we keep moving forward, is when you were talking about like Lee, when you were talking about like doing like relational work, and that how like even if people don't start out spiritual, how it can like that kind of starts to come up. I just like got a memory of a client of ours who was like, shared in our group chat at one point that was like, oh my gosh, guys, I got it. Like, love deeper. Like that was the name of our course. Our course is now called Queer Love, but like it used to be named Love Deeper. And they were like, oh, I got it. Like love deeper. Like I totally got it.
It's like, yes.
It's
the
like
depth.
Yeah,
it's
like the depth.
That is the spiritual component, right?
And they were talking about like the connection that they felt between this human that they had like just met, but that they were able to like, and these are my words, not theirs, but they were able to like drop in with this person and see this person for exactly who they were and love them for exactly where they were at and just like offer them that compassion and understanding. And so that was the story that they were telling. And then literally underneath that, they were like, oh my God, I just got it. Love deeper. I got it.
Dude, it's so true. It's the connection aspect. Because it's like you're removing all the muck. Right? And it's like,
well, whenever you're learning something, you're just removing all the things that aren't that. Like you're learning about love. You're just learning about things that aren't that, you
Would
know?
you guys say, so if love is self energy, it's like that core,
Right.
we're used to interacting with people's parts. So I'm bringing you back to IFS.
Yeah, please.
So like you look at your partner and you see all their behaviors and the things they do and all their personality, and then you like some of it and you don't like some of it, and there's all this conflict or whatever's happening, it's with their parts.
Right.
And so then in your course, you would be helping them to essentially get past all the parts to see their self on the inside.
Yeah, except for you, like I always say, start with you first. Like it all starts with you. And so when we help people, we do start with the individual, right? So you're actually like taking away all of the things that
their parts,
their parts,
so that they can feel their self,
right?
And then they can see the other person from the perspective of their self.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then also like, yeah, and then because in that process, it's like, oh, like if something's happening in a relationship, it's like that is a part of them, or that, oh, that's that story coming up, like what's that story, or whatever it is, like, you know, where it's not like, so in a moment of conflict, it's not like, oh my god, my partner's the worst, like it's like, oh, they're like really afraid right now, you know, and they're lashing out in like more of an anger response, but they're just really afraid and like acting kind of childish, so probably a younger part, right? Like, and just, but it's like, oh, because I know that for myself, you know, like of the younger parts of me, or the parts that feel scared, and we all do our own thing when we feel scared.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it also comes down to like one of the components here is like unconditional love versus unconditional relating. And like one of the things is like recognizing like I can have unconditional love for a person, but I can create the type of relationship that works with that person. So like just because
of the relationship,
right, like having conditions of the relationship where it's just like, and that's where boundaries come in, right? Where it's just like, yes, I can understand and I can be compassionate and I can like see like what's happening here. And also I can have boundaries.
Yeah, like
that like protect myself. Or like I can say like what type of relationship I want or don't want based off of someone's behavior or pattern of behavior.
And being able to communicate like, hey, this is what I've noticed, like this is what I noticed in our conflict, or in this situation, right? This is the pattern of our behaviors, of our conversations, and like, you know, then being able to talk about that and being like, we need to work on that. If they're like, no, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, it's like, well, that's information for you to be like, do I want this relationship, or like in this way, like what are the boundaries or what are the conditions that, you know, work for me, so that I'm not just like, I can have that understanding that, yep, their angry part is out or whatever.
Yeah.
But they're just like, whatever.
Totally. So with the IFS, we self-leadership is what we call it. So you've got yourself, which is your unconditional love, and yourself knows all of your parts and knows what all of your parts need, and then advocates on behalf of your parts. And so you can say, you know, if you need to go to your partner and set a boundary, like you're doing it because a part of you needs that boundary.
Yeah.
And it's such a shift of energy when, instead of these parts going to talk to your partner, you speak to your parts and then you go represent them. And that's where that parenting book and the mothering and it gets to a place where you're like, I will protect these children with my life because they are mine.
Yeah. And
so you're like, I have to leave this relationship because it's hurting my parts.
Yeah.
Or that you get so strong in your boundaries or your agreements, not because I have a boundary. It's right. I love this part of me and I protect her.
Yeah.
And then it's not another part of you that's like aggressively protecting.
Yeah.
Right. It's self-led, so it comes from a place of unconditional love, right? But on behalf of all your parts, and then seeing that in your partner too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really beautiful. I really love that, like, perspective.
I've seen it in my body really powerfully a couple times where I had there was a party in my art studio, and that little 12-year-old girl part of me that had the jealousy that I met, she was feeling kind of hurt and nervous because my husband was like flirting with another woman at the party, and I knew he was going to pursue her sexually.
Yeah.
And this little part of me was like, oh no, I'm scared this is going to happen. And then the party was over and everybody left the art studio. I also had a boundary that my husband would never have sex in my art studio with someone other than me. And I made that clear. This is my sacred space.
Yeah.
And so we got downstairs, the whole party had emptied out, and I looked around and I was like, where's my husband and that girl? So I knew they were up in the studio, and I felt this the pain of like, oh no, they're up there doing that thing, and I was just like trapped in the like, I don't want this to happen.
Yeah. And
then I felt the mother energy, and I like felt the little girl, and I was like, my little girl is not going to be hurt. And I like stormed up the stairs. And I would not normally be this assertive. I would normally have cowered away. And I busted in the door, and I've never felt this since, but I felt like a 40-year-old mother. And I just busted into my daughter's bedroom or whatever, and I was just like, both of you out. And then I looked at him and I was like, this is not happening. And I looked at her and I was like, this is not your fault. I completely understand. I just have rules, and no one's having sex in my studio. Okay. I love you. And they like gathered their stuff, and my husband had this huge grin. He was like, thank you. I was like, you're welcome. Get out. And then I was like, and I was like, oh, this is being I was like, I just protected a little girl that I love, And I was like, oh my that's God. A lie.
That's oh my dude.
Damn, like I felt that.
Yeah, there was not a cell in my body that doubted it. It was all there.
Yeah. Dude, I love that. Like, I feel like there's been times in my life, and again, like not in the exact same way, because like it's not necessarily like I'm aware of these parts or whatever, but it's like that energy of like, this is how I'm showing up to this. Like, this is what's happening. This is what, and just like I've been calling it like advocating for yourself, right? Like, when you are like an assured advocate for yourself, and it might not always sound like that, right? Like it might, like, it sounds different, but it has the same energy of just like, this is who I'm showing up as. This is exactly what I want. This is and sometimes it is very like it, but it's appropriate to the situation. But it's like that same energy of just like, I'm showing up for me right now. That's so beautiful.
Oh it was. I mean, the situation was shit, but it was so great to feel that self.
Feel that, yeah. No, definitely like shitty situation. Like that sucks. And I know that y'all have worked through it, but like that fucking sucks.
And that's also the extreme. So then it's like, I never want to be there again. So then the mom energy is, these are my rules. These are like, then the advocating happens in a more calm daily basis of you do not get to come to my studio. You do not get to do it. We don't throw parties in the studio. Like certain boundaries start to
arise.
Yeah,
for sure. But I think I can also hear like in what you're sharing that creating boundaries from that self energy is also more productive, and like that's something that I also try to get across in my coaching, is like not creating boundaries from a hurt place, but creating boundaries from, because then it comes across as like that, like F you, or or even it's like either aggressive or like victimy, right? Where it's just like, oh well, everyone always crosses my boundaries and it sucks and blah blah blah, blah. And like why create boundaries in the first place and all of that. But like rather coming from as from the using the IFS terms of like coming from that self energy where it is the word that comes up for me is pure, like where it is more pure, right? Where it's just like, no, this is exactly how I want to advocate for myself, and this is what it is for me. And there's that groundedness to it as well, where I think when you are when you're a victim, it's like you're stuck in the ground, but like when you're too aggressive, then you're like you're not grounded, right?
Yeah. I was just remembering with my mother, and my relationship with her was really kind of suffering and distant. And then now it's a lot closer. And I had to have like boundaries around my interactions with her. Not that I even like communicated with them with her, but that I had to have them with my own parts. So I could listen to my different parts and be like, okay, there's a part of me that doesn't want to be around her. So for that part, we'll have boundaries. Like when we go see mom, we're only doing these activities, or we'll only see for this much amount of time. And you can still have that feeling of boundaries, even just within yourself. Or like these parts are allowed to show up. And when we're doing this activity, these parts are not allowed to show up. They need to go elsewhere. And you can actually send your parts different places.
Oh.
So that's something I had with my mom when I'd go hang out with her and I was getting really triggered. So I had a boundary that none of my parts could hang out with my mom. I could only hang out with my mom if I was in unconditional self-love. And then I'd be with my mom and I'd be like listening to her, and then I'd start to feel a part get triggered and I'd be like, nope, go home. Like, and we already talked about this. You weren't supposed to come today. And another time I did that was like I went to this retreat in Mexico called Temptations. You guys know about it? It's like a swingers lifestyle retreat.
I don't know.
I've heard about it, to be honest. Yeah.
The wild party.
The wild party. Sound like it. It's called Temptation.
I know. Yeah, it's great. And when I was going at that time, I still had that young girl part that was kind of hurt by a lot of these sexual polyamorous situations that I was in. And I told her, you need to stay in Seattle. The other parts that enjoy this are going on this trip. And if you show up, I will send you home. And I asked all my parts, which parts don't want to come? And like my yoga teacher part, it's just like, I'll stay at home. I'll just meditate. I'll take care of the kid. And then the parts that wanted to come were like freaky party girl, musician girl, like all these.
Yeah, right.
And then
the rebellious one.
The rebellious one.
Yeah,
exactly. They're like, and then there were a couple times where I was like in this sex party and I'm looking around, and then I'd feel the little girl like, I don't want to, and I'd be like, hey babe, you need to go home right now. Go home. And then it would be like, and it's not like suppressing, because you're actually engaging with it, and you've agreed ahead of time, and you have a boundary that it's a family. The children are not invited to the sex party. Like that part of my psyche is not mature to be in that environment.
Right.
But if we never go, there's other parts of me that don't get to express.
Right.
And then when I come home from the trip, I check in with her and be like, you missed me. You felt this. What do we need to process? And so there's a lot of care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful. And I'm really, I feel like we should have a whole nother episode sometime about like sex and IFS, and especially like sex and like polyamory and IFS, like, and non-monogamy, right? We should do that. We should do that sometime.
Happily, it's my whole life.
But no, I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I feel like I don't know what time it is right now, but my computer is going to die, so we should
we'll wrap it up.
But we'll wrap it up. But anything else that you want people to understand about what we've been sharing about?
It's their first dip into.
Yeah. Generally it's best. Should I just talk to them in here? Should they look at me?
I get really close.
It's most helpful to two things. most helpful to just assume it's a part.
Mm.
If it's a thought or a feeling or an urge or a belief or a sensation or just basically any human experience you're having is a part. And if you look at it that way, then you can have that little bit of distance to relate to it.
Mm.
So in your community, what are some of the things that come up in the queer community? Anything that you're facing with your clients, any emotions or problems they're having in their life, these are all parts.
Yeah.
Because self is chill. Self is good.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't be in this conversation if you didn't have parts.
Right.
So if you're feeling something really strong, like, oh God, I can't take care of all these kids.
Yeah.
That's a part. Then you're just like, I see that you're overwhelmed. So when the people who are listening to this, you can start paying attention to when you feel taken over by an emotion or a thought. If it's strong, just pull away from it a little bit and say, hey, I can see that you're really overwhelmed. I can see you're really hurt. I can see you're really upset.
Yeah.
What else do you need me to know? And just hold space for it the way you would for a person that's upset. And it takes practice, and it can sometimes be really hard to pull off.
Yeah.
Because it's just like in you.
Yeah.
And so then if you can't get that little bit of distance, what you can do is soothe in the way that like if Elizabeth is having a hard day and I feel fine, I can soothe her. But if we've just been together through a horrible moment and we're both upset, we can still hug each other. So in that moment, you're like, wow, I am overwhelmed by this emotion, but I'm here for me. And I start to like soothe myself. And I'll just be like, I know this is a part. I'm here for you. And I say, I'm here. I'm here. And it kind of eventually, if I say it enough, it's like, who's here? Like, oh, I'm here, and this is a part. So I'm here is a super powerful mantra to create separation. And you can say, who else is here? So the language, the second thing I would share is that using parts language, saying a part of me is sad, a part of me is angry, that immediately changes the whole perception of the situation. And that's the first thing that I teach people when I start doing IFS with them. So naturally we'll say, I did this today, I did that, I feel this, I feel that, and just replace every I with a part of me. And then the I is, I am here. I am curious about my parts. I am confident that I can hold my parts.
I love all of my parts.
I love all of my parts. Yeah. So I is when you speak from self. And then otherwise you say a part of me because you're speaking on their behalf. Yeah. I can say, I love you, Elizabeth. All my parts love you.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
That's true.
That's true.
And then in that same way, you can say, I love you, and a part of me is angry at you. And this part of me wants me to tell you that it needs to talk about boundaries. And the whole conversation is I, and you can talk to the self. So it's like, we are loving each other, and you have a part that's hurt by my angry part. Can we advocate for them and mediate for them? But we're not in an argument because we're both in self. And so you create that
really powerful.
Super powerful.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. And it can go to the extreme where you can be like, I have a part that wants to punch you. And it really does. Like, it wants to hurt you. But that's not me. Like, I have this part that's violent right now. And the more you can explain it, like, it's got its fist balled up. It's making an angry face. I can see it's trying to avoid. And it felt this way because a part of you said this. You can basically say anything from that true purity. You're just describing what a part of you is doing.
Yeah. Right.
And then if you can say, and what is it afraid would happen if it wasn't that angry? It's afraid that if it didn't beat you up, it would be abused. Like, oh, and then the two of you together are like, oh dear. And then, oh dear. Right?
End scene.
And so it's you can say whatever's happening to your part because you two together in self know there's just pain underneath. So what is this? And then that part is afraid it would be abused. And what is it afraid would happen if it got abused? Well, then it would just feel horrible pain, and then the both of you are just suddenly full of compassion. Right. And you're like, well, that obviously has nothing to do with you. That happened 20 years ago, and it's just expressing and So yeah, using parts language de-escalates
Thank you so much for listening to our episode with Shaw. It was so wonderful to get to talk with her. Obviously, as those of you who listen to our podcast regularly know, we never interview people, so that was really a treat.
A treat for all. Dude.
Shaw's so great.
Yes. Love Shaw. She's hilarious.
She really is. And obviously, as we gathered from this episode, extremely intelligent and just a very insightful human being as well. And if Shaw is someone that you want to continue to learn from and connect with, we have included the links to her Substack on here as well. So you can go check out her Substack. She's doing a lot of cool things. She does do one-on-one coaching, and she also has group, and she also hosts a community, so you can learn from her via her community as well. So if you follow her on Substack, then you'll get to know more of the work that she does. She's also really so many options. Also, fun fact about Shaw is that she's a very gifted artist and musician.
Oh my god. Dude, homegirl is just talented.
Super talented. A very talented human being.
Yeah, and of course too, if you are very intrigued by IFS after that very awesome and amazing conversation and just want to learn more about that, maybe prior to working with someone, whether Shaw or not, but she's gonna be sharing all kinds of good stuff on that, so you can get more familiar with that practice.
Anything else you want to share before we sign off?
Yes, our monthly mentorship call is happening. This oh yes, woo woo woo. This Saturday, so November 9th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Pacific time, all on Zoom. And for our monthly mentorship calls, we always have a topic that we welcome all of your inquiries, or you just want to talk things out, get some support, some mentorship, and also just be part of the community to accomplish that. And this month's topic, speaking of internal family systems, we're talking about external family systems and navigating family dynamics within all the holidays and just the gatherings that tend to happen towards the end of the year. It usually brings us back into the spaces of family dynamics. And
that's not always that, especially in being a part of the queer community.
Yeah,
that's not always a fun or even safe space to navigate. And so we wanted to offer our support, our guidance, for anybody who has come to the monthly mentorship calls. You already know that it's a space where, number one, you can just share. It's really healing and comforting to share your experiences in a space with people who just get it, who you don't have to explain anything to, or you don't have to explain why you feel the way that you do. People just understand, and it's really, really healing to be in a space where you just feel understood. And it's also, as you know, both of us are relationship coaches and have been trained for years inside of holding this type of space for people. So we will give guidance, we'll give coaching, we'll ask questions, or if you just want a safe space to share and you don't want to talk about it, that's totally fine too. And if you have a particularly challenging thing that you want to navigate, or you're like, I just want it to be different this year, or I want to show up better this year, or whatever it is for you, this is also a space to talk that out as well.
Kind of workshop it, brainstorm it, different conversations, or maybe boundaries, or it's also there's just so many intricacies of this kind of time. Or maybe you're like, I don't want to spend any of the time with family, and I have to have those conversations.
Having to have the conversations about not going home.
Something of that nature, or just talking with people who maybe have kind of turn their backs on you because you are queer or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of things that can be present, or just you're around your family that you're just like, oh my God, why are they like this? And you just want to talk about that. Let's talk about it. So, and you can register through the link. We have it in the show notes and everything. It's free. Come talk and share and listen and something. Yeah, it's just healing to even just hear the experiences of others, because we all hear ourselves in the experiences of others.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. All right, love. We love you.
Love you.
We're rooting for you.
Love.
Keep going. We believe in you.
Bye. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Queer Love Podcast. We would love to hear from you. Drop us a line on TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter at Queer Love Relationships, or email us at queerloverelationships@gmail.com.
If you are interested in working with us, follow the Linktree link in the show notes. See if our offers resonate with you, and if they do, sign up with us or book a discovery session.
We are so grateful that you're here, listening, learning, and growing with us.
Until next time, keep loving.